told me one of your entrepreneurial philosophies, nobody's going to save you.
No one is going to come and save you. You need to be the one to get up off your butt, figure out what you need to do, and then do those things. And nobody is ever going to do those things for you.
What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, where today I'm joined by Shay Feltz. Shay is the founder of Nautix, and he's a visionary when it comes to IT services. He's managed IT service provider, transforming how small and medium-sized businesses approach technology. He's on a mission to simplify IT, which is something we all need to understand a little bit better, and turn it into something a little bit more powerful and a profit driver for companies that can't afford to get it wrong. Shay is a visionary when it comes to IT. He's been working in the industry for quite some time now, and in today's episode, we're going to learn about his business, Nautix, how it works with other businesses, why it's important, and how you could all take the principles of Shay starting his company and apply it into your own businesses that are just getting going or have already crossed the $1 million revenue mark. So with that all being said, let's welcome Shay to the show and get started with today's episode. Shay, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, you just let me know you're calling in from Minnesota. What's the weather like right now? It's currently, this is going to come out a little bit later, but it's currently in September. So
yeah,
here in Utah, it's getting a little bit colder now. It's still somewhat warm, but it's not quite as hot as it was during the summer.
Yeah, it's not too bad here right now. It's about 78 degrees. And Minnesota is a great place for about 3 to 5 months, and then it just gets overcast and below freezing for the remainder of the year. So it's great now. It's a good place to spend the summer and the fall, but the winters do get a little long.
Are you a Vikings fan?
Yeah, I'm a Vikings fan.
Okay, I feel like anybody from Minnesota, if they're not a Vikings fan, will get ousted out of Minnesota. But
it's hard for me because I was born in Wisconsin. I lived there for 2 years technically before I moved here. So I've got both sides.
Okay. Yeah, I have a friend who grew up in Minnesota, massive Vikings fan, and he had the issue right when all the training camp and stuff was going down of all the quarterbacks who were getting injured. Sam Darnold, I mean, you guys are 2-0 right now though, so it's starting off right.
Not a bad start.
We'll see once this episode actually publishes if you're still undefeated. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say no, but
you're probably 100% right.
No worries, man. Hey. Well, I'm excited to jump into today's conversation. I feel like the topic of IT is something that a lot of people can't digest. It's a very touchy subject. It's one of those ones where if you didn't study it in college, everyone just kind of outsources the work. And so you guys have kind of created something off of that. You've turned that into a business. Tell us about Nautix and when it was founded.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just kind of give you the whole spiel here. Started the company around 2017, I believe. Before that, I had a few odd jobs when I was a kid, fixing washing windows and picking up blocks in the yard at a boat dealership. And I learned pretty early on that I kind of wanted to do something for myself. I didn't really want to work for the man for the rest of my life. So as soon as I got my car, right around when I was 16, I started an iPhone repair business. So mobile iPhone repair, ordered a bunch of screens and went around and fixed people's iPhones. And that was a great entry point into, business as a whole. You get to learn about the ups and the downs and how great it can feel and how hard it can be at times. And I was able to do that all at a time where I basically had no risk. You know what I mean? I was 16 years old and my parents fed me every night, which was amazing. Super grateful for that. But we had kind of a cool opportunity that transitioned from fixing iPhones to IT. We had a family friend that owned a medical practice, and they were like, "Hey, Shay, we've got some IT problems. Could you take a look? You fixed the owner's phone." I mean, I must have fixed his phone 20 times. He was really great guy, but he was really tough on his stuff. But anyways, they "Hey, can you take a look at this?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I'd love to." So I went in, and it was just such a great experience because immediately my first sort of interaction with IT, I got to see how powerful it could be. And the reason for that was that they had a CT machine. They scanned patients' faces so the doctor could, interpret the scans and do whatever they needed to do as an ENT practice. And the server that was connected to this machine just kept crashing multiple times per day. So patients would come in, and these patients have been waiting for weeks to get this scan, and they wouldn't be able to do it. And that was obviously extremely frustrating for the practice and extremely frustrating for the patient. So seeing IT solve that problem, just seeing their eyes light up and see them so happy that this thing that was literally costing them money, they were losing revenue because of an IT problem. And as you know, there's so many things that can make a business lose money. Having IT be one of those things is crazy. That should never be the reason a business loses money. So seeing that transition from them having a problem to not having a problem was just such a beautiful experience. And that was, again, the launch point to get us to where we are today. So that's a little bit about me and what got me into IT in the first place.
Were you able to fix the machine, or did they call in a specialist?
Oh, no. I just took a look at it and whipped some scripts around and looked at some task manager stuff and ran some command line prompts. And I felt like a wizard when I was doing it because I had no experience. But I mean, it took a business from losing money on this thing that they couldn't use to them not losing money on a thing they can use. That was such a cool experience, and IT facilitated that.
So tell me where you learned all these tips and tricks when you're younger. Obviously, you said you had the iPhone business, but that doesn't directly correlate. That kind of got you on the business side of it. But
absolutely.
Where'd you start off with all of it?
Largely self-taught, pretty much 100% self-taught. And now I'm super happy to say that we have people on the team that are light years ahead of me in experience and knowledge. And I think that's good.
As it should be for every founder.
As it should be that way. But yeah, my own like sort of first party knowledge is pretty much all self-taught. And I think that's great. Formal education is obviously fantastic, but to be in the trenches, like you could read 1 million books on sales, but you'll learn more in your first 10 cold calls than you probably will over that 1 million years of reading books. So you got to have both.
Now that Nautix has grown and you have a lot of employees, like you said, one of the biggest things that founders need to look for is basically how can I alleviate some of the pressures of my day-to-day operations, kind of workshop them out to everybody else on my team. And how are we going to find somebody who is going to be 10x smarter than me in this exact area, be that marketing, be that sales, be that your IT problems that you just mentioned, specific areas, even in cybersecurity or different parts of the entire equation. So as the manager, as one of the founders of Nautix here, what was your hiring process like? And I'm assuming most of your employees are not in direct office. I'm assuming most of you are online trying to solve the issues for these companies. What's it like to manage those day-to-day operations, and how did you go about finding those employees that, like you mentioned, are light years ahead of where you're at right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Leadership is a big thing that I work on every single day and something that I continuously want to improve. But early on, that was not the case for me. And I was actually a really terrible leader, and I was an even worse delegator. I was definitely one of those founders that started and was like, no one can do this better than me. I have zero sales experience, but there's no chance that I am not the best salesperson in the world. And that was a mindset that absolutely crippled me for many, many years. So that initial piece of just learning to delegate and trusting other people to do things better than you can do them, and just you get this anxiety when you're like, hey, can you take care of this for the first time? And I would just pressure people to move through that anxiety, because once you do, you open up this beautiful world of all these other people working with you that you just can't get when you're a sole person. Like, think of any business in the world that's worth $1 billion. Their chances that there's one person running that company, they have a head count of 1, is 0, which doesn't happen. So if you want to grow these big, beautiful businesses, you need to learn to delegate, and you need to learn to lead the people that you've delegated to.
So specifically going back to the hiring though, as well, what avenues did you take to find these top tier employees that were light years ahead of you?
So starting off early, I found a lot of people on kind of unique channels. Reddit actually was where we got a majority of our early hires. And
I feel like that works very well for IT. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, it's great. A lot of great talent on Reddit, and we hire globally. So that gives us a ton of flexibility to get talent from anywhere in the world that it exists. I think sometimes businesses get siloed into hiring in like a 20-mile radius of their town, and their town has a population of like 2,000 people. What are the odds you're going to find the best talent in that local geography? It's like very, very low statistically. So I think opening up your hiring and being comfortable and setting up the tools and the processes and whatever you need to do to allow your organization to run remotely, ideally globally, is a huge unlock that you can do to make your business better.
And so now that you actually have your operation set up, and this is an endless, lifelong pursuit of trying to become a better manager and trying to understand your employees, their needs, their desires, how you can help them, how they can help you. It's a kind of a back and forth relationship. Now that a lot of these day-to-day operations are established, though, what does your role in the company look like?
Well, right now we're actually creating a ton of content. So a majority of the time, I'm a guy in front of the camera reading scripts and trying to speak more articulately. That actually takes up a lot of my time throughout the day. But outside of that, it's just being a leader and trying to remove blockers for people. So I try not to micromanage anyone. I try to sit down and learn, what are you doing and what can I do to make your life easier? My entire team will tell you this. I say it probably 7 times a day, but my job is to make your job as easy as possible. That's what any manager, anyone that anyone that has direct reports, I think that's their ultimate job. That's what you need to do. You just have to allow people to do their job. So whether that's getting them the tools, getting them the training, removing issues that they can't remove themselves, that's what you need to do. And that's what I try to do every day.
And so now let's take a bigger picture look at Nautix and tell us a little bit about your customers, who you guys serve, and what you guys do for them on a day-to-day operation standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we got started, we were working with smaller companies, so family medical practices, specialty medical practices, insurance offices.
I wonder where you got those ideas from.
Kind of fell into it a little bit. But yeah, those companies were around 10 to 20 employees. And we identified an opportunity to solve a bigger problem that people were having. In order to solve that problem, we had to move up market a little bit. So we moved from 10 to 20 in terms of headcount to 100 to 250 in terms of headcount. And the reason we did that is, I'll tell you soon, but before we dive into that, I think it helps to have a little bit of a background of how the IT industry works. So there's three main business models, and they're kind of on a spectrum. So on this side, you have a business model called break fix, which actually is a lot like iPhone repair. Like your computer breaks, or you have this one tech support problem, you bring it in, or they remote in, they give you an invoice for some hourly rate, and then you're done. That's break fix. On the other side, you have internal IT, which is super similar to hiring your own internal people, your own salespeople, your own marketing people. They work for you and they serve the IT needs for the company. That's actually the best way to do IT, but to do it properly, you need a team of like 50 people. Like if you look at enterprise IT teams, they have dedicated teams, fully staffed, and then all the other ancillary managers and all that stuff.
Which obviously costs a lot of money, a lot of management.
Absolutely.
You need to be a very big company to be able to manage it.
Absolutely right. But a lot of companies have needs that require that sort of team. So in the middle, you have an MSP, and MSP stands for Managed Service Provider. So what an MSP does is they build their own internal IT team. So that's basically what we did at Nautix for the first 5 years. So we just built IT teams. So we have a cybersecurity team, a network team, a system administration team. And then the MSP leases that team out to businesses that need more knowledge, more support, more reliability, more expertise than what a break fix shop can provide, but don't want to hire 50 people for their 100-person company because number one, that's super expensive. And number two, it's just completely unreasonable because you have half of your headcount be IT people. It doesn't make any sense. So that's what the MSP does. And the reason for moving from 10 to 20 employees to 100 to 250 employees is because once companies hit 100 employees, they kind of need like Tim in IT. Like they kind of need the guy in the office. It's just when you get to that size, it's almost a necessity. But they don't have the revenue yet to hire 50 people, and nor should they, nor would they. So what we did at Nautix is we developed this IT champion model. And the champion model is super cool. No one's really doing it. We take someone and we hire them, we retain them, we train them. They're our employee, but we place that employee on the client site 40 hours a week, full time. So the client gets that, they get Tim in IT, they get the IT resource, but they don't have to manage them, train them, retain them, all that stuff. Now, of course, one person cannot do the job of 50 people. Great solution, because we have all those IT teams that we've been building over the past years also working for that same client. And the beautiful thing is there's 100% alignment between that on-site resource and the back-end teams because they're literally from the same company. A lot of times a company would hire one internal IT person that's managed by them, and then another MSP that's, of course, outsourced. And then you get into this like weird gray area where like you're working on this and you're responsible for this. And wait, I thought you were going to do that. It's just this like messy gray co-managed thing. So the IT champion model solves all of those problems.
And so as you've kind of grown to, like you said, originally 10 to 20 customer or employees every business you worked with, and now you're in the hundreds of employees per business, has that changed your guys' operational processes at Nautix in the sense that you have to work more directly with them? How often do they actually have to call upon the entire team just versus the one person that you've stuck with that company?
That's a great question. Usually when someone has the IT champion sort of acts as the internal POC or point of contact for all those IT issues. And then they can either escalate or directly route whatever issue it may be to a back-end team. But the client works directly with the champion a majority of the time. And it's up to the champion to delegate that out or kind of act as like a first line response for whatever issue arose. But the beautiful thing is because they have the champion like 3 doors down, it's instantaneous. It's not an email ticket to help desk that gets picked up by a dispatcher and that takes an hour. And then they have to route it to an L1 and that takes another hour. And all of a sudden, these hours stack up when you're working with an outsourced team and your keyboard hasn't worked for like 7 hours. That doesn't happen when you have someone in your office that can just go in and look at it right away.
So that's a very unique role that you're hiring for. And I want to know a little bit more about these champions. Where did you go? I know you said in the early days you found a lot of your initial employees from Reddit groups and whatnot.
Mm.
Being a champion would be an interesting role in the sense that they could go out and just find these bigger jobs and be kind of the head honcho of the IT program at some larger company. But how do you go and attract the talent for Nautic specifically?
Yeah, so believe it or not, the IT champion isn't a super technical role. I wouldn't call it a culture hire, but it's much more a presence and a willingness to serve than someone that can run an entire data center. So this is
sit down and go.
Exactly. So in the IT world, there's different like levels. Like on the help desk, which are the people like solving issues. You've got like L0, which is like password resets, and you've got like L1, which is like some remote support, and you go L2, L3, and then you go like junior, senior sysadmin, network admin. This is more of like an L1 role. So talent is actually pretty readily available for this specific role. And of course, we can't hire this remotely because a lot of people want on-site work. So where we have a client, we just do a normal round of hiring in that geographical area. It takes us 2 to 4 weeks, which is a normal recruiting cycle for most companies. And we find top 3 candidates, give them all bios and all evaluations, present them to the client, and it's ultimately the client's choice who they want to work for. So at that point, it's kind of like we work almost like a staffing firm, but we're staffing for ourselves. The client just gets the approval, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I'm also assuming what happens in the case of my company was using Nautic for the services. For whatever reason, we decide to part ways. Now, I'm assuming that employee that you hired, do you still stick them with your team, or are they let go because they were in office and you don't necessarily have to roll for them remotely? How does that process look?
Yeah, I think abandoning anyone that gives any sort of time, effort, dedication to your company is a super bad practice. So the beautiful thing about being remote is if for whatever reason we part ways for a client, which hasn't happened yet, by the way, we have 100% client retention, which is something that I ideally want to keep forever.
That is a very good statistic to be having right there. Love it.
But if for whatever reason they do part ways, that person can work remotely. And we only hire great talent, which means that we can keep great talent for the entirety of the relationship. There's nothing particular about serving an on-site client. They can just move to an L1 help desk position remotely and sort of act as like a backup help desk. So we always try to keep them in the company if we can.
That's perfect. I want to talk about that a little bit more. 100% retention across your clients for the past, how long has you been in business? Around 6-7 years now?
Yeah, I think late 2017 or late 2018 is when I founded the company.
Okay. So you've been around the block a few times now. Talk about your successes, because let alone the difficulty of retaining clients, no matter what industry you're in, if you're working with other businesses, it is hard. There's a million competitors out there. They're always trying to come after your clients. They're trying to make sure that they could steal your business. What kind of operations do you have in place to ensure that your clients remain your clients and they have a good interaction with Nautic?
I mean, you basically said it right there. They just need to have a good interaction. The way to make clients stick is to make the value that they get out of the relationship more than the cost that they have to pay. So if they're paying this and they're getting this much value, unless you come into some sort of weird blocker where like a technical ability that you don't have, there's no reason for them to leave that relationship because their needs are getting solved for this amount of money they're paying and they're getting this amount of value. When that starts to go like this, then they're like, okay, we're paying this, but we're getting basically the same amount of value. Maybe we should look at other options, maybe a more cost-effective option to increase the value. When that happens like this and they're paying this and getting this, then they leave. So I think fundamentally, all you ever need to do to retain clients, because we're 100% MRR, right? We don't do projects, like we only work with ongoing clients, is to always make sure that the value, the perceived value that the client is getting is greater than the cost that they are paying for you. And fundamentally, if you follow that principle, you'll have 0% churn and 100% retention for the rest of your life. Of course, barring bankruptcy, people go out of business, that stuff happens.
Right.
But that's just a fundamental North Star to follow.
So this actually goes back to a model that right before we hit record on today's episode, something wasn't very smooth. At the end of the day, it's our problem to still address those issues. It has to be our actions that we need to take in order to solve whatever issue they were having. Even if, once again, it was their fault, no matter what happens, we have to take the ownership in making sure that happens. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about this philosophy that you live by.
Yeah, so it really all started during this period of admittedly like shameful inactivity. So I founded Nautix. We got a few great clients off of referrals, and then for years we basically didn't do any new client acquisition, and that was 100% the fault of my own. And I was basically just sitting there like, maybe someone is going to come grow this company for free. Like maybe I'll just get like 20 amazing referrals and be able to close all of them with 100% close rate. And that is just such a foolish mindset. And I'm happy I had that experience because it allowed me to like immediately identify that the activities that I was doing would not result in any sort of outcomes that I wanted. Basically meaning I was doing nothing and I was getting nothing. So it was great early on to identify that. So now I can move away from it. But during that entire process, that period where I was just doing nothing, I was hoping and praying that maybe someone would come in and just be like, I have zero experience doing this, but I'm going to do this for you for free and grow this company, and we're going to be, multimillionaires together. And that is just, it's foolish because no one is going to come and save you. You need to be the one to get up off your butt, figure out what you need to do, and then do those things. And nobody is ever going to do those things for you. And you can also be the one that's stopping you from doing those things in the first place. Like you need to get out of your own way as well. No one's going to come save you. You have to do it yourself. And sometimes you have to get out of your own way to allow you to do it yourself. You can't be scared. You can't be fearful. You can't let those things stop you. It's good to feel those things. Like it's good to be afraid. Being fear allows you to assess risk. And if you can't assess risk, you usually make pretty poor decisions. So being fearful, being sad, these are all like okay emotions to have, but you can't let them stop you because that when you do that, you get in your own way. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that.
Yeah, I want to make sure this doesn't get pushed under the rug there. That is one of the best pieces of advice I've heard from another founder. And for a lot of the listeners out there, if you are just getting started on your journey, I know there's plenty of you out there who your businesses are thriving right now. You're thinking, okay, Shay, I understand this. Give me some more information. But for everyone out there who's a little bit younger in their journey, their business is just getting going and they're trying to figure this out. It's so often inside of our heads, we think, wow, if only I can land this one client and then they'll be able to refer me to everyone. Yeah. If only I could get this one task done. If only I could optimize this website or make this one ad and all these clients will just start rolling in. And it's a naive situation you put yourselves in because in some cases, yes, it might help you in many instances. But at the end of the day, the steps you need to take are determined by you. And you know in your business what you have to get done. But sometimes it's the things that you have to get done that you don't want to at all. And so what Shay just told us there is set aside all of your emotions around whatever subject it is. If you need to go land a client, go start knocking on doors. Go start showing up to these businesses in person. Go and cold call. Like pick up the phone and start doing whatever it takes. And so, Shay, I appreciate that advice. I feel like that's some of the most impactful advice I've heard here on the podcast in a long time.
Yeah, and I could double down on that too. You mentioned you identified a problem and you had set a set side of things that you need to do to solve that problem. The beautiful thing about life in general is you don't need to feel any of these ways to do the thing that you need to do. If you need to run a marketing campaign, you need to create your copy, create your creative, and launch it. You know what you don't need to do? Be happy to create marketing campaign. You don't need to be happy or be sad or be motivated. You don't need to be any of those things to complete the work that is required of you. All you have to do is do the work. So don't worry about being motivated. Don't worry about being happy. Don't worry about being sad. These are good things to acknowledge. But again, you can't let them get in your way. Just focus on what needs to be done and remove all the things that aren't doing those things. And you will find yourself to be a happier person. The moments in my life where I was the least happy are when I was focused most on being happy. I was like, was today a good day? Was today a bad day? What can I do tomorrow to be happier? And again, I was accomplishing nothing and focusing purely on what made me happy. Just remove all of that stuff and just focus on what needs to be done. It's a huge piece of advice I have for people. And it's something that I wish someone would have screamed in my ear and no one did. I had to learn that the hard way. So take my lesson without the scar.
I love it. I love it, Shay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Before we close out, as always, everybody, if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to share it with somebody who you think would be impacted by it. If you know somebody who's struggling with their IT solution, Shay could be your guy over at Nautix. Their entire team could help out your friend, your family member, your pastor, your local congregation. Whoever would need to hear this conversation, make sure to share it. You guys are also my best form of marketing, so we can continue to grow the Get Over Yourself podcast. All of Shay's links will be included in the episode description down below. But Shay, if anyone wants to reach out to you directly, where can they find you?
LinkedIn is absolutely the best place. Send me a DM. I would love to talk to anybody. LinkedIn. Follow me, of course. I would love to see you there.
Awesome. Once again, everybody, all that will be included in the episode description below. So whatever podcasting platform you're listening on, make sure to check out the description and find Shay later. Shay, as we close out today's episode, one final question. You already gave a little bit of entrepreneurial advice at the end here, but if you can give one worldly piece of advice, one piece of advice the entire world could hear right now in this moment, what would it be and why?
I think that you just need to do it, and you just need to take the risk. And I know that's such an easy piece of advice because everyone says, just take the risk, just do it. But think about yourself when you're 80 and you're saying goodbye to your grandkids on your deathbed. Like, you want to give them the most epic story that you can. And saying I was scared and I didn't do it, or I didn't do it because I had this blocker, I didn't do it because I didn't feel happy that day. That's not a cool story. That's not a story you want to tell. Think of your life as a story, and at the end of your life, make yourself the story that you want to share. You know what I'm saying? Like, my dog ran away, my wife left me, and I still did these things despite that. That's a cool story. Everything bad that happens to you, add it to that story and just keep moving forward. That's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shay. Guys, I appreciate you for listening to today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Make sure to tune in next Friday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time for the next episode, and we'll see you then.